London, 1847. The carriage wheels rattled against Grosvenor Square as Lady Clara Atherton stared out at the rain-slicked streets, adjusting her black gloves. "We have arrived, Your Grace," announced Silas. "Perhaps we might circle once more?" Clara suggested, her voice barely audible. The carriage door opened, and Lady Beatrice Cavendish, resplendent in vibrant sapphire, peered inside, her expression a mix of concern and determined cheer. "Clara, my dear, don't tell me you're attempting escape. I've gone to extraordinary lengths to draw you out of that Hampshire estate." Clara sighed. "It's simply, Beatrice, I'm not certain I'm ready." Beatrice squeezed her hand. "Nonsense. Widowhood is no excuse for becoming a recluse, particularly when one possesses youth, beauty, and a fortune." "You need life," Clara conceded, accepting Beatrice's outstretched hand as she descended. The footman at the grand entrance bowed deeply. "Lady Clara Atherton, Duchess of Ravenscroft," he announced, his voice carrying clearly over the gentle hum of conversation. As Clara crossed the threshold, a ripple passed through the elegant throng. Conversation faltered momentarily. Heads turned as if on a single pivot. Clara felt her cheeks warm under the sudden, intense scrutiny of countless eyes, many of which she had not met in over 2 years. The air, thick with perfume and expectation, seemed to press in on her. "Clara, my dear," Lady Beatrice, resplendent in ivory, silk, and pearls, swept forward. "How wonderful to see you at last! I was beginning to fear you'd turned into a spectre, haunting that dreary Rosewood Manor of yours." Clara accepted her cousin's embrace with a small smile. "Rosewood is hardly dreary, Beatrice. It is peaceful." Beatrice linked her arm through Clara's. "Peace is for the elderly and the infirm. You, my dear, need life, and perhaps," she added with a meaningful glance around the glittering assembly, "someone to share it with." Clara stiffened. "Beatrice, you promised." "I promised not to arrange matches," her cousin interrupted. "I said nothing about allowing nature to take its course. Now come." Many wished to renew their acquaintance. As Beatrice led her through the throng, Clara nodded politely to familiar faces, responding to condolences and pleasantries with practiced composure. The ballroom glowed with the light of 1,000 candles, reflecting off crystal chandeliers and the jewels adorning London's elite. "Lady Clara, what a delight to see you again," remarked Lady Ashworth, an elderly dowager whose sharp eyes missed nothing. "We had begun to wonder if you would ever emerge from seclusion." "I have been occupied with estate matters," Clara replied evenly. "Yes, I imagine managing Rosewood Manor must be quite the challenge for a young woman." Lady Ashworth observed, her tone suggesting it was anything but admirable. Before Clara could respond, a sudden hush fell over the assembly. The music, which had been building toward the opening dance, faltered momentarily. "Well?" Lady Ashworth breathed, her eyes widening. "It seems the evening has become decidedly more interesting." Clara turned to follow the collective gaze. A tall figure stood in the entrance, his severe black evening attire emphasizing his commanding presence. She discerned the hard line of his jaw, the uncompromising set of his shoulders. "The Duke of Blackwood," Beatrice whispered, her fingers tightening on Clara's arm. "Alistair Beaumont. I did not expect him." Even in seclusion, rumors of the feared Duke had reached Clara. His first wife's mysterious death, his ruthless acumen, his icy demeanor. As if sensing her scrutiny, the Duke's gaze swept the room, a slow, deliberate movement that eventually settled on Clara. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, their eyes locked across the crowded ballroom. Something in his expression, a flicker of recognition perhaps, or mere piercing curiosity, caused Clara's heart to quicken inexplicably. It was an intense, silent communication amidst the vibrant chaos, a connection that felt both fated and profoundly unsettling. Then the Duke was moving, cutting through the crowd with purposeful strides. People parted before him like water before a ship's prow, conversations dying as he passed. "Goodness!" Beatrice whispered, her fingers tightening on Clara's arm. "He appears to be coming this way." Clara felt rooted to the spot, unable to move. He stopped before her, and Clara was struck by the intensity of his eyes, gray as a winter storm, and just as forbidding. "Lady Clara Atherton," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I believe the first waltz is about to begin." He extended his hand. "Would you do me the honor?" A collective gasp rippled through their vicinity. "I would be delighted, Your Grace," Clara heard herself say, placing her gloved hand in his. As he led her to the center of the ballroom, Clara felt dozens of eyes following their progress, could almost hear the furious whispers behind fans and gloved hands. The orchestra struck up the opening notes of the waltz, and the Duke's hands settled at her waist, firm yet respectful. "You are trembling," Alistair observed quietly as they began to move in perfect time. "Forgive me," Clara replied, striving for composure. "It has been some time since I danced." 2 years, I believe, he said, guiding her through a turn with effortless grace. "Since before your husband's passing." Clara looked up in surprise. "You are well informed, Your Grace." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I make it my business to be well informed, Lady Clara." The implication sent a flutter of alarm through her chest. "And do I interest you, sir? I cannot imagine why. We have never been introduced." "Until now," he corrected. As for why, his gaze seemed to penetrate her facade. "Perhaps I recognize a kindred spirit." "In what way?" "Someone who wears their solitude like armor," he replied, his voice low. "Who finds safety in isolation." Clara missed a step, momentarily thrown. He adjusted seamlessly, hand tightening. "Careful," he murmured. "We are being watched." Indeed, as they circled the floor, Clara became acutely aware of the attention. Dancers gave them a wide berth. "You must know your reputation precedes you," Clara said, finding courage. "People speak of you in whispers." "And what do they whisper, Lady Clara?" There was something dangerous in his tone. "That you are to be feared," she answered honestly. "That misfortune befalls those who cross you." His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "And does that frighten you?" "I have faced my share of misfortune already, Your Grace. I find I have little left to fear." For the first time, genuine surprise registered on his face, quickly replaced by respect. Then, with perfect correctness, the Duke bowed over her hand. "Thank you for the dance, Lady Clara." "The pleasure was mine, Your Grace," she replied automatically. He studied her face. "I wonder," he said quietly, "if you would consider calling on my sister, Lady Isabel, tomorrow afternoon. She hosts a small gathering for tea at Blackwood House. She has few female acquaintances and would welcome your company, I believe." The invitation was so unexpected that Clara found herself nodding. "Yes, I would be pleased to make her acquaintance." "Excellent. Until tomorrow, then." With a final bow, he released her hand and walked away, leaving Clara standing alone. Beatrice was at her side in an instant. "Clara, what were you thinking?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Beatrice demanded. Clara watched the Duke's retreating figure, a curious sensation settling in her chest, something between trepidation and anticipation. "I believe," she said slowly, "I have just waltzed with the devil." "Worse," Beatrice replied grimly. "You've caught his interest. Heaven help you now." But as Clara turned back to her cousin, she found herself wondering if she needed no heavenly intervention. For the first time in 2 years, she felt truly alive, her heart racing with curiosity. Later that night, unable to sleep, Clara found herself drawn to the quiet study of Beatrice's London townhouse. She lit a lamp and began to review papers from her late husband's estate, a task she usually delegated but which offered a welcome distraction. Among dusty ledgers and deeds she found old maps of Derbyshire. Her finger traced the winding boundaries of Rosewood Manor, her inherited property. A nascent railway line, faintly sketched in red, cut through a remote corner of her lands. She recalled fleeting whispers at the ball about new railway developments and ambitious land acquisitions. A prickle of unease, distinct from her earlier apprehension, began to spread. Was her quiet sanctuary in Derbyshire more significant than she realized? Just as Clara prepared for bed, her lady's maid, Wilson, entered with a small package. "This arrived by messenger just after we returned, Your Grace," Wilson explained. The footman said it was most urgent. The package, wrapped in plain brown paper, contained a folded letter and a small brass key. Clara opened the letter with trembling fingers. The bold, masculine handwriting was unfamiliar. The message was brief. Lady Clara, beware of forming attachments too quickly. Trust few. Question everything. Until tomorrow. A. B. A chill settled over Clara, despite the room's warmth. Clara stared at the cryptic note, her heart racing. Every instinct for self-preservation urged her to ignore the summons, yet something stronger, curiosity perhaps, or a deeper recognition that her life's path now depended on her response, compelled her. She placed the brass key on her nightstand, then blew out the candle. Tomorrow she would answer the Duke's call. For better or worse, she would step fully into Alistair Beaumont's shadow world. The following morning, Clara's carriage rolled to a stop before Blackwood House, an imposing gray stone mansion. Unlike neighboring houses, the Duke's residence presented a forbidding countenance, its windows like watchful eyes. "I shall return in 2 hours, Your Grace," Silas said, helping Clara descend. His weathered face betrayed concern. "Unless you wish me to wait." Clara squared her shoulders, adjusting her dove-gray visiting dress. "That won't be necessary, Silas. Lady Isabel is expecting me." The door swung open before Clara could knock, revealing a silver-haired butler whose dignity seemed etched into the very lines of his face. "Lady Clara Atherton," she announced herself. The butler bowed. "We have been expecting you, Your Grace. I am Harrington. Please follow me." His voice was hushed, yet perfectly clear, reinforcing the solemn grandeur of the house. Clara felt an increasing sense of stepping into a meticulously ordered, yet subtly mysterious world. Harrington led her through a grand entrance hall and down a corridor lined with portraits. Stern-faced men and women, their gazes formidable, bore the unmistakable Beaumont features, strong jawlines, high cheekbones, and those penetrating gray eyes. Clara felt a chill of recognition. These were the eyes of the Duke. Each portrait seemed to watch her passage, silently judging. The lineage of power and unyielding determination was etched not just into the canvas, but into the very atmosphere of the house, a testament to Alistair's heritage. They arrived at a set of double doors, which Harrington opened with a flourish. "Lady Clara Atherton, your ladyship," he announced. The drawing-room beyond was a revelation. This chamber was a sanctuary of femininity. Delicate furniture in soft blues and creams, vases brimming with fresh flowers, and shelves lined with books. A young woman rose from a chaise by the window, her face lighting with genuine pleasure. Lady Isabel Beaumont bore a striking resemblance to her brother, sharing his dark hair and fine bone structure, but where his features were hardened, hers remained soft, almost ethereal. "Lady Clara," she said, coming forward, "how delightful that you accepted our invitation." Clara took Isabel's offered hands, immediately warming to her unaffected manner. "I confess I was surprised to receive it. Your brother and I are barely acquainted." A knowing smile touched Isabel's lips. "Alistair rarely does anything without purpose, Lady Clara. Please, sit with me." As they settled onto the chaise, Clara studied the younger woman, noting a delicacy about her, reinforced by slight pallor. "Alexander mentioned it," Isabel said, as Harrington returned with a tea tray. "He researches those who catch his attention." Clara felt a jolt of intrigue, realizing Alistair's depth of awareness. Isabel's expression sobered. "Alexander was not always as you see him now. Circumstances have hardened him." "You refer to the death of his wife, Lady Evelyn?" Clara asked, regretting her directness. "Not at all," Isabel replied, pouring tea. "Evelyn's death changed him profoundly. But it was not only that." She paused. "My brother has shouldered many burdens alone." Clara accepted the cup. "Including your care." Isabel's gaze sharpened. "You are perceptive, Lady Clara. Yes, I have been in poor health since childhood. Alistair has been both brother and guardian since our parents, passing 10 years ago." Before Clara could respond, the drawing-room door opened. Alistair Beaumont stood on the threshold, his tall figure silhouetted. "Lady Clara," he said, "I trust my sister has been entertaining you adequately." "Your sister is a delight, Your Grace," Clara replied, rising. I am grateful for her invitation. It was your invitation, as I recall, he corrected, moving into the room. Alistair, must you be so literal? Isabel chided. You'll frighten Lady Clara away. I doubt Lady Clara frightens easily, he replied, his gaze never leaving Clara's face. Do you, Your Grace? The challenge was unmistakable. I believe I mentioned last night that I have little left to fear, Clara responded evenly. Later that day, spurred by Alistair's cryptic purpose and the lingering whispers of railway expansion, Clara returned to Beatrice's study. She delved deeper into her late husband's estate papers, her earlier unease now focused determination. She uncovered an old, detailed map of Derbyshire. Her finger traced the boundaries of Rosewood Manor, and then, starkly apparent, the proposed railway expansion. It cut directly through a significant corner of her inherited land. Tucked within the map, she found notes from her husband, expressing frustration over persistent, well-funded attempts to acquire those specific parcels years ago. The pieces began to align. As their tea concluded, Alistair unexpectedly invited Clara to a small dinner party the following evening. Clara found herself increasingly intrigued by this complex man and his gentle sister. She accepted, partly out of genuine interest in Isabel, but mostly due to Alistair's enigma and the unsettling implications of her recent discovery about Rosewood Manor. A sense of inevitability settled over her. She was being drawn deeper into his world, a world where strategic purpose and personal interest seemed inextricably linked. She nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. Blackwood House was a labyrinth of grand corridors, but Clara, guided by Isabel's earlier hints about the loyal household staff, found her way to the older servants' quarters in the late afternoon. She had sought out Mrs. Gable, a stoic, silver-haired woman who had served the Beaumont family for decades, and crucially, had been Lady Evelyn's personal maid. Under the pretext of discussing the finer points of household management for an upcoming charitable event, Clara steered the conversation towards the late Duchess. Mrs. Gable, initially hesitant, her aged face a mask of practiced discretion, eventually softened. She spoke of Lady Evelyn's increasing melancholia, a shadow that had darkened her final years, and the heart-wrenching delusions that had sometimes consumed her. Clara listened, her heart constricting as Mrs. Gable described Duke Alistair's desperate, ceaseless attempts to find a cure. Consulting every specialist, his profound care and heartbreak evident, even through the maid's poignant recollections. The conversation solidified Clara's nascent belief in Alistair's innocence regarding Evelyn's tragic end. Later that afternoon, back in the quiet sanctuary of her chamber at Lady Beatrice's townhouse, Clara found herself pacing. Her thoughts were still on Mrs. Gable's somber revelations, a clearer picture of Alistair's past now taking shape. A soft knock at the door, then Wilson entered, her expression discreetly curious, carrying a small, hastily delivered envelope. "This just arrived for you, Your Grace," Wilson said, placing the innocuous package on the dressing table. Inside, Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she found a small, ornate brass key and a folded note. The bold, masculine handwriting was unmistakably Alistair's. "Matters have arisen that require immediate attention. The enclosed key opens the garden gate at the rear of Blackwood House. Come at your earliest convenience tomorrow morning. Tell no one of this message, not even your cousin. Trust no one until we have spoken, A.C." The words were urgent, secretive, and deeply unsettling. Clara clutched the key, the cold metal, a stark contrast to the sudden heat in her chest. What could be so urgent as to demand such secrecy, such a perilous, unchaperoned meeting? The brass key felt impossibly heavy in Clara's pocket as she made her way through the misty London morning. She had slipped away from Beatrice's townhouse under the pretense of an early walk, navigating the quiet streets with quickening steps, her heart thrumming with each block that brought her closer to Blackwood House. The Duke's urgent summons had robbed her of sleep, leaving her both apprehensive and undeniably intrigued. The rear garden of Blackwood House was enclosed by a high stone wall, ivy-covered and forbidding, presenting a stark contrast to the elegant Georgian homes of Berkeley Square. The gate, almost hidden between two ancient oak trees, yielded to the key with a soft, clandestine click. Beyond lay a formal garden, its paths and hedges rendered ethereal by the swirling morning mist. Clara followed a gravel path toward the house, her footsteps muffled by the damp air, feeling a thrilling sense of illicit adventure. The conservatory gleamed like a crystal palace at the garden's edge, its glass walls clouded with condensation. Clara hesitated at the door, suddenly aware of the impropriety of her situation. To visit a bachelor's home, unchaperoned at his secret invitation. It was scandalous by any measure. Yet, something in the urgency of the Duke's note, and her own burgeoning curiosity, convinced her that conventional proprieties must yield to more pressing concerns. The conservatory door opened silently, admitting her to the warm, moist atmosphere within. In daylight, the collection of exotic plants was even more impressive than it had appeared by moonlight. Orchids in every conceivable color bloomed alongside ferns, palms, and flowering vines that created a verdant labyrinth, a hidden paradise where light filtered through the glass ceiling. "Lady Clara!" She turned, startled to find the Duke emerging from between two towering palms. He was dressed more casually than she had yet seen him, in riding breeches and a white shirt open at the collar, his dark hair slightly disheveled. The effect was startlingly intimate, a glimpse of the man beneath the Duke's formidable facade. In the diffuse light filtering through the glass, his gray eyes appeared almost silver, losing some of their forbidding quality. "Your Grace," she acknowledged, her voice a little breathless, suddenly acutely aware of her compromised position, alone with him in this secluded, exotic space. "Your note sounded urgent." "It was," he confirmed, stepping closer. The air seemed to thrum with unspoken intensity between them. "I apologize for the secrecy," Alistair continued, his voice deep and smooth. "But I feared our conversation last night might have been overheard." "By whom?" Clara asked, surprised by her own calm, though her heart beat a rapid tattoo against her ribs. "There are ears everywhere in London society," he replied, his gaze sweeping the verdant space, as if checking for unseen listeners. "And what I must tell you requires absolute privacy." He gestured toward a small iron bench, partially concealed by flowering vines. "Please, sit." Once they were seated, Alistair's expression grew grave. "I believe you may be in danger, Lady Clara." "From what quarter?" she asked, her voice steady. "That remains unclear," he admitted. "But certain events have come to my attention that suggest someone wishes to harm you, or perhaps use you to harm me." "You underestimate yourself," he said, his voice softening, but more relevantly, "you underestimate what your growing association with me might mean to certain parties." "You refer to the rumors about your first wife?" Clara asked, then immediately regretted her boldness. "Forgive me, that was unconscionably direct." Alistair's expression tightened, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "Partly. Lady Evelyn's death was not what it seemed, but neither was it what rumor suggests." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on some distant point among the orchids. "Evelyn suffered from melancholia," he finally said, his voice low. "Severe, debilitating melancholia that worsened after our marriage. I sought every treatment, consulted every specialist. Nothing helped." Clara's heart constricted at the raw pain evident in his voice. "I'm sorry. The night she died," he continued, his voice barely a whisper, "I was away on business. She took an overdose of laudanum. The official finding was accidental death, but there were those who suspected otherwise." "That you were somehow responsible," Clara surmised. "Yes. There were letters, you see, desperate, confused letters Evelyn had written expressing fear of me. Letters she wrote during the depths of her illness, when she sometimes believed I meant her harm. And these letters became public? Not public, no. But they fell into the hands of certain individuals who have used them to influence me over the years. Blackmail, Augusta breathed. A crude term, but accurate. His eyes met hers directly. "I tell you this, Lady Clara, not to gain your sympathy, but so you understand the nature of the world you have entered by associating with me." "And you believe someone might use me to further pressure you?" Clara asked, a chill running through her despite the conservatory's warmth. "Or worse," Alistair said grimly. "Last night, after our guest departed, I received this." He withdrew a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. The message, composed of letters cut from newspapers and pasted to the page, was stark and menacing. Clara read the chilling words aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "The widow will follow the wife unless the Duke relinquishes all. She danced with death at Pembroke House." She felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "This is disturbing." "It is a threat," Alistair said flatly. "Against you. Why? What could anyone hope to gain by harming me?" His gaze was unwavering, his expression etched with a grim determination that sent a shiver down her spine. The very real danger of her situation was no longer a distant whisper, but a stark, tangible presence. "Several possibilities present themselves," Alistair replied, rising abruptly to pace the narrow path between the exotic plants. "The most obvious being to pressure me into selling certain properties or business interests I have acquired in recent years, properties that some believe were obtained through questionable means." "Were they?" Clara asked directly, her gaze following him. "I have never broken the law, Lady Clara," he said carefully, his voice even, "but I have perhaps bent it on occasion, particularly when dealing with those who deserve no better." Clara frowned, recalling her own discovery of the old maps and her husband's notes. "You mentioned properties that border my eastern estates yesterday. Does this refer to Rosewood Manor?" His pacing stopped. He turned to face her, a flicker of something akin to respect in his gray eyes. "You are perceptive, Lady Clara. Yes, Rosewood Manor's strategic position, sitting between Blackwood and the railway line being constructed to Southampton, is a prime target for acquisition. Control of your inherited lands would allow access to that railway, access that would increase the value of surrounding properties enormously. And yes, that is the true motive for many of these machinations." The realization solidified Clara's active role in this dangerous plot, no longer just a target, but a player. "If this is all about property and railway access," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper, "why not simply tell me from the beginning? Why the elaborate charade of social calls and charity committees? And why not simply distance yourself from me? Remove me as a target?" Alistair was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on her. "Would that be your preference?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "I did not say that," she replied. "I merely question your strategy." For the first time that morning, a ghost of a smile touched his lips, quickly gone. "The simplest, yes," he said, his voice unexpectedly vulnerable. "But perhaps not the most satisfactory." "Meaning?" Clara prompted, her heart quickening inexplicably. "Meaning, Lady Clara," he admitted, his gaze intense, "that I find I am unwilling to relinquish your acquaintance, even to ensure your safety. Selfish, perhaps, but true." The admission, delivered with such stark honesty, momentarily robbed Clara of speech. His vulnerability was a chink in his formidable armor, drawing her in even further. I don't know what to say," Clara finally managed. "Say you will allow me to protect you," Alistair replied, returning to sit beside her, his voice firm yet gentle. "Say you will trust me, despite the rumors, despite the danger." Clara took a deep breath. "How do you propose to protect me?" "First, by keeping you close," he said. "The charity ball provides an excellent opportunity. As co-hosts, we will have legitimate reason for frequent communication." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "And second, by discovering who sent this threat." His expression hardened. "I have suspicions, but no proof as yet. My strongest suspicion falls on Sir Malcolm Ashworth. Until I do, you must be vigilant. Accept no invitations without consulting me first. Drink nothing at social gatherings that you have not seen poured. And trust no one completely, not even those who seem most benevolent." "Not even you?" Clara asked, only half in jest, a faint smile touching her lips. Alistair's gray eyes met hers with unexpected warmth, a flicker of genuine feeling in their depths. "Especially not me, perhaps. I am, after all, the source of your danger." "Yet here I sit," she observed, her gaze steady, "conspiring with you nonetheless. I judge people by their actions, Your Grace, not rumors." "And what have my actions told you thus far?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his tone. "That you are protective of those you care for, that you value intelligence and directness, that you harbor secrets, yes, but not necessarily sinister ones." "A generous assessment," he murmured. "Time will tell if it is an accurate one," she replied. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Clara became acutely aware of their isolation, of the impropriety of their meeting. Yet she felt no fear, only a curious sense of standing at a crossroads, her future hanging in the balance of this moment. The spell was broken by the distant sound of the garden gate opening. Alistair rose swiftly, moving to the conservatory door to peer out into the mist. "Harrington," he said, tension leaving his shoulders. "My steward. I must have lost track of time. We have estate business to discuss." "I should go," Clara said, rising. "Wait." He caught her hand, his touch sending a jolt of awareness through her. "Meet me tomorrow at the lending library on Bond Street. 3:00. We must discuss the charity ball arrangements, and I shall have more information by then." Clara nodded, her heart still quickening from his touch. "Until tomorrow, then." He released her hand reluctantly, his gaze lingering on her face. "Take care, Lady Clara. Remember what I said." "Trust no one completely?" Clara asked, attempting to lighten the moment as she moved towards the side door. Alistair's expression remained grave, his gray eyes piercing. "Especially not yourself. If your instincts tell you to trust me too readily, I am not perhaps as good a man as you believe." With those unsettling words lingering in the air between them, Clara slipped out through a side door of the conservatory, making her way back through the misty garden and out the gate through which she had entered less than an hour before. His warning, both about external dangers and his own character, echoed in her mind, leaving her with a mixture of apprehension and an undeniable fascination for the complex man she had just left. The days that followed passed in a whirlwind of activity, as Clara found herself drawn deeper into the Duke's world. The charity ball provided legitimate reason for frequent meetings, often in the company of Isabel, whose genuine warmth and affection had quickly endeared her to Clara. Together they planned every detail of the event, from the floral arrangements to the supper menu, while Alistair attended to security matters with unnerving thoroughness. "You truly believe someone might attempt something at the ball itself?" Clara asked during one such planning session in Blackwood House's elegant library. Alistair did not look up from the guest list he was scrutinizing. "I believe in preparing for all possibilities," he replied. "Sir Malcolm Ashworth has confirmed his attendance." Clara looked up from her notes. "Do you still suspect Sir Malcolm of sending the threat?" Alistair finally met her gaze, his expression hardening. "He remains the most likely candidate. His bank holds significant loans against properties that border my eastern estates, properties I've recently expressed interest in acquiring. If he can force me to sell certain key holdings, the value of his collateral would increase substantially." He paused, his voice dropping slightly. "But his motivation runs deeper than mere business. His family was ruined by my father in a similar ruthless takeover years ago. His quest for revenge against the Beaumonts is generational, Lady Clara. It is deeply personal, and now it targets not only my fortune, but my newfound happiness." The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Clara. Such a deep-seated hatred made the threat against her far more chilling. "And Lady Seraphina?" Clara inquired, recalling the calculating look in Henrietta's eyes whenever she glanced between Clara and the Duke. "She claims a prior engagement, but I have my doubts." Alistair's expression darkened perceptibly. "Seraphina's grievances are more personal. She once harbored expectations I had no intention of fulfilling before my marriage to Lady Evelyn. She has never forgiven either slight." He paused, the silence in the library heavy with unspoken history. In any case, with both Ashworth and Seraphina potentially present at the ball, along with Lord Julian Croft and several other potential adversaries, vigilance will be essential. Clara felt a prickle of unease. The layers of personal vendetta and generational animosity were far more complex and dangerous than she had initially imagined. "You suspect Lord Julian Croft as well?" Clara asked, surprised. Despite the young Viscount's continued attempts to engage her interest during the past weeks, she had found him charming, if somewhat shallow, hardly the type to resort to anonymous threats or deep-seated malice. Alistair's gaze finally met hers, unwavering. "I suspect everyone until proven trustworthy," he replied, his voice even. "A habit that has served me well over the years." Clara frowned, considering this. Julian's overtures had seemed genuine, if a little transparent, but Alistair's unwavering suspicions suggested a depth to the young man she hadn't perceived. The thought that even someone as seemingly innocuous as Julian could be an adversary was unsettling. "And yet you trust me," she observed. "A woman you've known less than a month." Something softened in his expression, a subtle shift that sent a flutter of warmth through Clara's chest. "Trust is perhaps too absolute a term," he said, his voice low. "Let us say I am more inclined to believe in your integrity, an inclination that grows stronger with each passing day." The admission, delivered with such careful precision, nevertheless brought an unexpected thrill. Before she could respond, the library door opened to admit Isabel, her pale face flushed with excitement. "The final RSVPs have arrived," she announced, waving a sheaf of cards. "Over 300 guests confirmed, Clara. We've done it. This will be the most successful fundraiser in the hospital's history." As Isabel reviewed the acceptances, Clara found her attention drawn to Alistair. He had returned to his papers, but she felt his awareness of her like a physical touch. Something was shifting between them, something beyond the practical alliance formed in the face of unknown threats, something that frightened and exhilarated her in equal measure. The evening of the charity ball arrived with a flurry of last-minute preparations. Clara had spent the day at Blackwood House, overseeing the final arrangements alongside Isabel. Now, as she prepared to change for the evening, she found herself in the elegant guest chamber that had been set aside for her use, a courtesy that had raised Beatrice's eyebrows, but which Isabel had insisted upon as a practical necessity. "You can hardly be expected to travel back and forth in your ball gown," Isabel had declared. "Besides, Alistair says it's safer for you to remain here until the last guests have departed." The reminder of potential danger cast a momentary shadow over Clara's anticipation. Despite Alistair's vigilance, no further threats had materialized, nor had he been able to prove Sir Malcolm's direct involvement in the original message. Yet Clara could not shake the feeling of being watched whenever she ventured into society, a prickling awareness of hostile scrutiny from unknown quarters. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Wilson, her lady's maid, entered with a large box. "This just arrived for you, Your Grace," Wilson said, placing the box on the bed. "From His Grace, the Duke." Clara opened the package with curious fingers. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a magnificent gown of silver silk, embellished with delicate beadwork that caught the light like tiny stars. Beneath it was a smaller velvet box containing a pair of diamond earrings and a matching bracelet of breathtaking elegance. A folded note lay atop the jewelry. "For tonight's co-hostess, the silver suits your eyes." Clara traced her fingers over the bold handwriting, her heart quickening at the personal nature of the gift. It was not merely extravagant, it was thoughtful, the silver tones a perfect complement to her coloring, the style exactly to her taste without being ostentatious. "Shall I help you dress, Your Grace?" Wilson asked, her eyes wide at the splendor of the gown. Clara nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. An hour later, Clara descended the grand staircase, a vision in silver silk and duchess lace. Alistair waited at the bottom, his tall figure commanding in formal black evening attire. In the weeks since their clandestine meeting in the conservatory, something had shifted between them, a deepening of trust, perhaps, or something more profound that neither dared name. "Lady Clara," he said, taking her gloved hand as she reached the final step. His gray eyes, usually so guarded, held an undisguised admiration. "You outshine every star in the heavens tonight." "Flattery, Your Grace," she replied with a smile, a lightness in her tone she hadn't known she possessed. "How unlike you." "Not flattery," he corrected, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Merely accurate observation." Isabel appeared at her brother's side, lovely in pale blue that complemented her delicate coloring. "Clara, You look magnificent. The ball will be the talk of London for months." "Thanks to your tireless efforts," Clara said warmly, genuinely fond of the younger woman who had become a dear friend. "And yours," Isabel insisted. "Alistair says you have a gift for organization that rivals his own. High praise indeed from my perfectionist brother." The Duke's lips quirked in a half-smile. "I merely recognize efficiency when I encounter it." "Such a romantic soul," Isabel teased, nudging her brother affectionately. "Oh, Dr. Grant has arrived. I must speak with him about the hospital committee meeting tomorrow." As Isabel hurried off to greet the physician, Alistair offered Clara his arm. "Shall we greet our guests? The first carriages are arriving." For the next hour, they stood together in the entrance hall, welcoming London's elite to Blackwood House. Clara noted with interest the varying reactions to their joint hosting duties: surprise from most, speculation from some, and poorly concealed disapproval from a select few. Lady Seraphina Ashworth arrived on the arm of a distinguished gentleman who was not her husband, Lord Alaric Vane. "Sir Malcolm sends his regrets," Seraphina explained, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Urgent business in Manchester. Lord Vane was kind enough to escort me in his absence." "How fortunate," Alistair remarked, his tone neutral, though Clara sensed his tension. "Lord Vane, I believe you know Lady Clara Atherton." The silver-haired Earl bowed over Clara's hand. "Only by reputation, I'm afraid. A pleasure to make your acquaintance at last, Lady Clara." "The pleasure is mine, my lord," Clara replied automatically, though something in the Earl's appraising gaze made her uneasy. As the couple moved on, Alistair leaned close to murmur in her ear, "Keep your distance from Vane. He and Ashworth are close associates, and his presence here is no coincidence." The warning sent a shiver down Clara's spine, a stark reminder that beneath the glittering surface of the evening lay darker currents. Lord Julian Croft arrived shortly thereafter, his handsome face lighting at the sight of Clara. Over the past weeks, he had called at Beatrice's townhouse several times, his attentions becoming increasingly marked, despite Clara's polite rebuffs. "Lady Clara," he said, bowing deeply, his gaze lingering on her silver gown. "You are a vision tonight. I hope I may claim at least one dance." Before Clara could respond, Alistair intervened smoothly. "I fear Lady Clara's dance card is quite full, Lord Julian. As co-hostess, her duties are numerous this evening." Julian's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Of course. Perhaps later, then." As he moved away, Clara glanced at Alistair. "That was rather pointed, Your Grace." Alistair's expression remained impassive, but his gray eyes darkened. "Julian has been asking questions about you," he replied quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Questions that go beyond mere social interest." "What sort of questions?" "About your finances, primarily the exact value of Rosewood Manor, your connections in Derbyshire." The use of her given name, rare despite their growing closeness, emphasized the seriousness of his concern. "He is not what he seems, Clara." "You still suspect him of involvement in the threat against me?" she asked, a growing unease coiling in her stomach. "I suspect everyone," Alistair replied grimly. "But yes, he ranks high among my concerns." The arrival of the final guests prevented further discussion, but the chilling implications of Alistair's words lingered, casting a new shadow over the glittering festivities. The dinner party at Blackwood House proved to be an intimate affair. With only 8 guests gathered in the elegant dining room, Clara, seated to the Duke's right as the guest of honor, found herself the object of intense scrutiny from the other attendees. Lord Edward Finch, a distinguished gentleman in his 50s with kind eyes and a ready smile, had been introduced as the Duke's closest friend and advisor. His wife, Lady Eleanor, a graceful woman with auburn hair threaded with silver, had immediately taken Clara under her wing, her gentle manner providing a welcome buffer. Across the table sat Sir Malcolm Ashworth, a banker whose sharp gaze seemed to calculate the worth of everything and everyone in his path. Beside him, his wife, Lady Seraphina, a woman of remarkable beauty and equally remarkable coldness, had barely acknowledged Clara's presence beyond a perfunctory nod. Lady Beatrice had been placed beside Lord Julian Croft, a young viscount whose charm and good looks had earned him a reputation as one of London's most eligible bachelors. The final guest, Dr. Thomas Grant, A serious man with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles was seated at Isabel's right hand and appeared to divide his attention between his hostess and professional observations of the company at large. Alistair's expression remained guarded, his selections clearly deliberate. "Lady Clara," Sir Malcolm addressed her as servants cleared the soup course, his voice smooth but with a sharp edge. "I understand you manage your late husband's estate yourself. Most unusual for a woman of your age and station." Clara felt Alistair stiffen beside her, a subtle tension in his posture. "I have excellent stewards, Sir Malcolm," Clara replied, her voice even. "But yes, I take an active interest in Rosewood's operations." "How progressive," Lady Seraphina remarked, her tone suggesting it was anything but admirable. "I believe competence knows no gender," Lord Edward Finch interjected smoothly, his smile warm. "And from what I've heard, Rosewood Manor prospers under Lady Clara's guidance." "Indeed," the Duke confirmed, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. "The estate's yield has increased by 15% since she assumed control. A remarkable achievement in these economic times." Clara turned to him in surprise. "You seem remarkably well informed about my affairs, Your Grace." "As I mentioned yesterday, neighboring properties are of particular interest to me," he replied, his expression unreadable. His gaze, though impassive, held a flicker of something Clara couldn't quite decipher. A challenge, perhaps, or a subtle warning. The unexpected depth of his knowledge, however, sent a curious shiver through her. "Speaking of which, Lord Julian," Alistair continued, deflecting the conversation, "how fares your father's venture in Cumberland?" The Viscount, who had been gazing at Clara with undisguised admiration, started slightly. Progressing well, I believe. Father seldom shares the details with me, I'm afraid." "A pity," the Duke remarked, his tone dry. "One would think the heir to such extensive holdings would take a keener interest in their management." Lord Julian flushed, and Clara felt a twinge of sympathy for the young man, despite Alistair's subtle critique. "Perhaps Lord Julian has other interests that command his attention," she suggested softly, attempting to ease the tension. "Indeed I do, Lady Clara," he replied gratefully, his gaze lingering on her. "I am something of an amateur botanist. I've been cataloguing native orchid species in Derbyshire." "How fascinating!" Isabel exclaimed, her gentle voice a welcome interruption. "You must see our conservatory after dinner. Alistair has imported several rare species from the continent." The meal progressed through several more courses, the conversation flowing easily under Lord Edward's skilled guidance. Clara found herself drawn into discussions of literature, music, and even politics, subjects she had missed during her self-imposed isolation. "You are remarkably well-read for a young woman," Dr. Grant observed after she had contributed to a debate on Wordsworth's later works. "My father believed in educating daughters as well as sons," Clara replied, "and widowhood provides ample time for reading." "A waste," Lady Seraphina murmured, just loudly enough to be heard. "A beautiful young woman like yourself, buried in books and ledgers." "I consider it neither waste nor burial," Clara countered politely, her chin lifting subtly. "Merely a different application of one's faculties than society typically expects of women." "Well said," the Duke commented, and Clara detected a note of approval in his voice that sent an unexpected thrill through her. Lady Seraphina's eyes narrowed slightly, missing nothing. As the final course was served, Isabel turned the conversation to the upcoming charity ball for the Children's Hospital, an event she was apparently helping to organize despite her frail health. "We had hoped to secure the assembly rooms," she explained, "but they were booked for a private function. We're still searching for a suitable venue." "What about the Pembroke ballroom?" Lady Beatrice suggested. "I'm sure my husband would be amenable." "That's very kind," Isabel replied, "but we anticipate over 300 guests. I fear even your generous ballroom would be somewhat cramped." "Perhaps Blackwood House could host," Clara suggested impulsively, her gaze falling on Alistair. "Your ballroom seems more than adequate." A hush fell over the table. The Duke rarely opened his home to large gatherings, a fact Clara realized belatedly, as she noted the surprised expressions around her. "An excellent suggestion," Alistair said after a moment's consideration, his eyes meeting Clara's. "Isabel, make the necessary arrangements." Isabel's face lit with delight. "Are you certain, Alexander? It would mean opening much of the house to the public." "For a worthy cause," he replied, his gaze still fixed on Clara. "I find I'm willing to make exceptions to my usual privacy." The significance of this concession was not lost on the other guests. Lady Seraphina's eyes narrowed speculatively, while Lord Edward regarded his friend with undisguised astonishment. "How generous!" Lady Seraphina said, her voice silky. "One wonders what has prompted this sudden philanthropy." "Perhaps," the Duke replied, his gaze still holding Clara's. "I am simply following Lady Clara's admirable example of emerging from seclusion." His words were a public affirmation, a subtle defiance to the Whispers, and a clear statement of their alliance. After dinner, the gentlemen declined to separate for port, instead joining the ladies in the music room, where Isabel was persuaded to play the pianoforte. Her skill was considerable, the music filling the elegant chamber with haunting melodies that seemed to reflect her gentle, yet melancholy spirit. Clara found herself standing near a set of French doors that opened onto a small balcony. Seeking a moment's respite from the intensity of the evening, she slipped outside into the cool night air. The balcony overlooked a walled garden silvered by moonlight and fragrant with early roses. Clara drew a deep breath, steadying herself against the stone balustrade. "Seeking escape so soon?" The Duke's voice behind her caused her to start. "Merely some fresh air," she replied, turning to face him. In the moonlight, his features appeared less severe, the hard lines of his face softened by shadow. "My guests can be somewhat overwhelming," he acknowledged, moving to stand beside her, "particularly the Ashworths." "Sir Malcolm seems rather calculating," Clara observed. "An apt description," the Duke said with a dry smile. "He is a man who sees relationships purely in terms of advantage." "And Lady Seraphina?" Clara inquired. Something darkened in his expression. "She is a woman accustomed to getting what she wants by whatever means necessary." There was a history there, Clara sensed, though whether romantic or otherwise, she could not determine. "They seem unusual choices for an intimate dinner. One keeps potential allies close," he replied, "and potential adversaries closer still." "And which am I?" Clara asked boldly, compelled by his candor. The Duke studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Neither, I think. At least, not yet." "Then what am I, Your Grace? Why invite me here? Why single me out at the ball? I am nobody of consequence." "I disagree," he said softly, his voice a low murmur. "You are a woman of considerable consequence, Lady Clara, more than you realize." Before she could press him further, the sound of the French doors opening interrupted their exchange. Lord Julian Croft stepped onto the balcony, his handsome face lighting with pleasure at the sight of Clara. "Ah, there you are, Lady Clara. I had hoped you might honor us with a song. Lady Isabel assures me you have a lovely voice." Clara glanced at the Duke, whose expression had reverted to its customary impassivity. "Perhaps another time, Lord Julian. I fear I'm somewhat out of practice." "Then perhaps you might allow me to escort you through the conservatory," the Viscount persisted. "The moonlight makes it quite magical, I'm told." Again, Clara looked to the Duke, uncertain why she felt the need for his approval. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I would be delighted," she said, accepting Lord Julian's offered arm. As they turned to leave, the Duke spoke once more. "Lord Julian," the younger man paused. "Yes, Your Grace." "Take care with my orchids," Alistair said, his voice deceptively mild. "Some varieties can be quite toxic if handled improperly." The warning was clear, though its precise meaning remained ambiguous. Lord Julian's arm tensed beneath Clara's hand. "I shall be the soul of caution, Your Grace," he replied with forced lightness. The conservatory was indeed magical in the moonlight, its glass walls and ceiling creating a cathedral of silver and shadow. Exotic plants created mysterious silhouettes, and the air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming flowers. "Lady Clara," Lord Julian began as they strolled between rows of rare specimens, "I hope you will permit me to call upon you during your stay in London." "That is very kind, my lord, but I'm not certain." "Please," he interrupted, stopping to face her. "I have admired you from afar for some time, even before your husband's passing. Your grace and intelligence were spoken of with great respect." Clara was surprised by his earnestness. "You flatter me, sir." "Not at all," he insisted. "And now, seeing you here, I find myself even more captivated. May I hope that you might consider me as a friend at least?" There was something almost desperate in his manner that puzzled her. "Lord Julian, we are barely acquainted." "Julian, please," he said, taking her hand. "And acquaintances must begin somewhere, must they not?" Before Clara could respond, a quiet voice spoke from the shadows. "Lord Julian, I believe Lady Isabel is asking for you." Dr. Grant emerged from behind a large palm, his expression carefully neutral. Lord Julian released Clara's hand reluctantly. "Of course," he said. "Lady Clara, will you accompany me back?" "In a moment," she replied. "I should like to admire the orchids a while longer." With obvious reluctance, Lord Julian departed, leaving Clara alone with the doctor. "You should be cautious, Lady Clara," Dr. Grant said, once the Viscount was out of earshot. "Regarding Lord Julian?" she asked. "Regarding everyone in this house," he replied, his voice low, "including perhaps especially our host." Clara studied the serious-faced physician. "You are the Duke's doctor, are you not? And his friend, I hope." Dr. Grant confirmed, "which is why I feel compelled to warn you. The Duke's interest in you has not gone unnoticed, and there are those who might seek to use you to gain advantage over him." "Use me? How?" Dr. Grant hesitated. "The circumstances surrounding the first Duchess's death were complicated. There are those who believe the Duke was somehow responsible, though I know this to be false. And you think Lord Julian is among these people?" "I think," the doctor said carefully, "that Lord Julian's sudden interest in you may not be entirely based on your personal charms, considerable though they are. There are deeper currents at play here, Lady Clara, currents that have nothing to do with romance." "What currents?" Clara pressed, her frown deepening. "Lord Julian's family has a long-standing feud with the Beaumonts, dating back generations," Dr. Grant explained, his voice barely a whisper. "His father, like Sir Malcolm Ashworth, suffered greatly at the hands of the previous Duke, Alistair's own father. They lost much of their ancestral lands through ruthless business dealings. Then his interest in Rosewood Manor, Clara surmised, is not for its beauty, but for its strategic position. He seeks to use me to gain what his family lost?" "Precisely," the doctor confirmed. "His family's fortunes are tied to his, and Sir Malcolm Ashworth's bank holds significant loans against their remaining properties. Julian is, in essence, a pawn in a much larger generational conflict." "I am not a pawn to be moved about on some chessboard," Clara said, indignation rising. "No," Dr. Grant agreed, his expression grave, "but you may find yourself on one nonetheless. Be careful, Lady Clara. Alistair Beaumont is a good man, despite what rumors may suggest. But his world is more dangerous than you know. His enemies are many, and their motives run deeper than mere profit." With that cryptic warning, the doctor offered his arm. "Shall we rejoin the others?" As they walked back toward the music room, Clara's mind whirled with questions. What game was being played here, and why did she seem to be at its center? The remainder of the evening passed without incident, though Clara was acutely aware of the undercurrents flowing beneath the polite conversation. Lord Julian continued his attentions, though somewhat subdued after Dr. Grant's intervention. Lady Seraphina watched her with calculating eyes, while Sir Malcolm engaged the Duke in what appeared to be a heated discussion of business matters in a corner of the room. The glittering crowd, the hushed conversations, the subtle glances, all seemed to conspire to create an atmosphere of heightened tension. As the evening drew to a close, Clara found herself once more in the Duke's company as he escorted her and Beatrice to their waiting carriage. "I trust you found the evening tolerable," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "More than tolerable," Clara replied honestly, though somewhat perplexing. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Life is seldom straightforward, Lady Clara." "So it seems," she agreed, "particularly in your orbit, Your Grace." He assisted her into the carriage with careful hands, his touch a fleeting current of warmth. "Until the charity ball, then." I shall call upon you tomorrow to discuss the arrangements." "Tomorrow?" Clara echoed, surprised. "Unless that would be inconvenient." "Not at all," she replied, aware of Beatrice's curious gaze. "We shall expect you." As the carriage pulled away, Beatrice leaned forward eagerly. "Clara, you dark horse, what have you done to captivate the fearsome Duke of Blackwood? He scarcely took his eyes from you all evening." Clara shook her head, genuinely bewildered. "I haven't the faintest idea, Beatrice. We've barely exchanged more than pleasantries." "Nonsense. Something has clearly caught his interest." Beatrice's eyes gleamed with excitement. "How extraordinary! The most elusive bachelor in England pursuing my widowed cousin." "He is hardly pursuing me," Clara protested, "and I am not seeking his attention." Beatrice's expression grew serious. "Be careful, Clara. The Duke's reputation is complicated. There are rumors about his first wife's death that were never satisfactorily explained." "So Dr. Grant implied," Clara murmured, recalling the conversation in the conservatory. "You discussed this with Grant?" Beatrice looked shocked. "What did he say?" Clara hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. Only that the circumstances were complicated, but that he believed the Duke innocent of any wrongdoing. Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? "Grant has been the Duke's physician for years, Clara. I'm not saying you should avoid Alistair Beaumont. Heaven knows you deserve some excitement after 2 years of mourning. Just proceed with caution." "I assure you, caution is uppermost in my mind," Clara replied, though even as she spoke she wondered if it was entirely true. There was something about the Duke that called to her, a recognition of kindred pain perhaps, or simply the magnetic pull of a man whose every word and gesture hinted at hidden depths. It was a dangerous draw, she knew, but one she found herself increasingly unable to resist. The thought of retreating to the quiet solitude of Rosewood Manor, even with its newly discovered strategic importance, seemed far less appealing than the perilous intrigue that now surrounded Alistair. Her heart, once encased in grief, was beginning to beat with a new, dangerous rhythm. Later that night, as Clara prepared for bed in the guest chamber of Beatrice's townhouse, her lady's maid Wilson handed her a small package. "This arrived by messenger just after we returned, Your Grace," Wilson explained. "The footman said it was most urgent." The package, wrapped in plain brown paper and sealed with unmarked wax, contained a folded letter and a small brass key. Clara opened the letter with trembling fingers. "Lady Clara, forgive the late hour of this communication. Matters have arisen that require immediate attention. The enclosed key opens the garden gate at the rear of Blackwood House. Come at your earliest convenience tomorrow morning. Enter through the garden and proceed to the conservatory. Tell no one of this message, not even your cousin. Trust no one until we have spoken. A. B. Clara stared at the cryptic warning, her heart racing. What could possibly be so urgent as to require such secrecy, and why did the Duke trust her, a virtual stranger, with whatever mysterious situation had arisen? Every instinct for self-preservation urged her to ignore the summons, to return the key unused. Yet something stronger, curiosity perhaps, or a deeper recognition that whatever path her life was to take now depended on her response to this moment, compelled her to action. "Is everything well, Your Grace?" Wilson inquired, noting her mistress's troubled expression. "Yes," Clara replied quickly, folding the letter. "Merely a social matter. That will be all for tonight, Wilson." After her maid had departed, Clara paced the bedroom, the brass key clutched in her palm. The enormity of the Duke's request settled over her. To visit a bachelor's home unchaperoned, at his secret invitation, it was scandalous by any measure. Yet she knew deep in her soul that she would go. Tomorrow she would answer the Duke's call. For better or worse, she would step fully into the shadow world of Alistair Beaumont and discover what fate awaited her there. She set the key on her nightstand and blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness. The brass key felt impossibly heavy in Clara's pocket as she made her way through the misty London morning. Having slipped away from Beatrice's townhouse under the pretense of an early walk, she navigated the quiet streets with quickening steps, her heart pounding. The Duke's urgent summons had robbed her of sleep, and the clandestine meeting at the lending library on Bond Street was a calculated cover. Rosewood Manor's strategic position, sitting between Blackwood and the railway line being constructed to Southampton, is a prime target for acquisition, and the true motive for many of these machinations. Alistair had confirmed, his grave expression etched in her memory. Clara absorbed the full implications of her inheritance, a prize in a dangerous game. Weeks before the charity ball, the library at Blackwood House hummed with a different kind of energy. Scrolls of paper covered the grand mahogany table, maps unrolled alongside fabric samples for decorations, and guest lists, meticulously penned, lay open for review. Lady Clara Atherton, Lady Isabel Beaumont, and Duke Alistair Beaumont worked with an intense, quiet focus, a shared purpose binding them. Clara found herself drawn deeper into Alistair's world, with each passing day, her organizational skills a perfect complement to his meticulous planning. As Alistair scrutinized a guest list, his finger paused beside a familiar name. Sir Malcolm Ashworth has confirmed his attendance. Quote, he stated, his voice devoid of inflection. Though I had anticipated as much. Clara glanced at him, noting the grim set of his jaw. You still believe he is responsible for the threats? Alistair's gaze, sharp and unwavering, met hers. He remains the most likely candidate. His generational resentment now targets more than just my fortune, Clara. It targets my newfound happiness. And that, he added, a dangerous glint in his gray eyes, makes him more dangerous than ever. And Lady Seraphina? Clara inquired, recalling the elegant, yet calculating woman. She claims a prior engagement, does she not? Alistair's expression darkened further, a shadow crossing his formidable features. Seraphina's grievances are more personal, I'm afraid. She once harbored expectations I had no intention of fulfilling before my marriage to Evelyn. She has never forgiven either slight. Clara nodded slowly, understanding the deep-seated malice that fueled such a vendetta. It was a hatred born not just of ambition, but of wounded pride and misplaced affection. In any case, Alistair continued, his gaze sweeping over the intricate plans spread across the table, with both Ashworth and Vane present at the ball, along with Lord Julian Croft and several other potential adversaries, our vigilance will be essential. Clara felt a shiver of unease, a stark reminder that, beneath the elegant preparations lay a treacherous game. Clara regarded Alistair thoughtfully, noting his unwavering suspicion of almost everyone. You suspect everyone, yet you trust me, she observed, her voice soft, a woman you've known less than a month. A flicker of something akin to warmth softened the hard lines of Alistair's face. He paused, setting down his pen. Trust is perhaps too absolute a term, he admitted, his gaze holding hers. Let us say I am more inclined to believe in your integrity, an inclination that grows stronger with each passing day. The admission, delivered with such careful precision, sent a flutter of warmth through Clara's chest. Before she could respond, Isabel, her pale face flushed with excitement, entered the library, waving a sheaf of cards. The final RSVPs have arrived, Alexander. Over 300 guests confirmed. We've done it, Augusta. This will be the most successful fundraiser in the hospital's history. The evening of the charity ball arrived with a flurry of last-minute preparations. Clara had spent the day at Blackwood House, overseeing the final arrangements alongside Isabel, whose genuine warmth had become a comforting presence. Now, as she prepared to change for the evening, she found herself in the elegant guest chamber that had been set aside for her use, a courtesy Isabel had insisted upon as a practical necessity. You can hardly be expected to travel back and forth in your ball gown, Isabel had declared. Besides, Alexander says it's safer for you to remain here until the last guests have departed. The reminder of potential danger cast a momentary shadow over Clara's anticipation. Despite Alistair's vigilance, no further explicit threats had materialized, nor had he been able to definitively prove Sir Malcolm Ashworth's involvement in the original message. Yet, Clara could not shake the feeling of being watched whenever she ventured into society, a prickling awareness of hostile scrutiny from unknown quarters. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Wilson, her lady's maid, entered with a large box. "This just arrived for you, your grace," Wilson said, placing the box on the bed. "From his grace, the Duke." Clara opened the package with curious fingers. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a magnificent gown of silver silk, embellished with delicate beadwork that caught the light like tiny stars. Beneath it was a smaller velvet box containing a pair of diamond earrings and a matching bracelet of breathtaking elegance. A folded note lay atop the jewelry. "For tonight's co-hostess. The silver suits your eyes." A.B. Clara traced her fingers over the bold handwriting, her heart quickening at the intensely personal nature of the gift. It was not merely extravagant, it was thoughtful. The silver tones a perfect complement to her coloring, the style exactly to her taste, without being ostentatious. "Shall I help you dress, your grace?" Wilson asked, her eyes wide at the splendor of the gown. Clara nodded, suddenly unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. As Wilson helped her into the shimmering silk, Clara looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror. Something had changed irrevocably in her life since that first waltz with the Duke of Blackwood. The quiet isolation of her widowhood, once a comforting shield, now seemed a distant memory, a life she could no longer inhabit. Whether for good or ill, the path she was on, intertwined with Alistair's, was undeniable. Her heart still held a tremor of trepidation, a lingering echo of the dangers she faced, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of purpose, of excitement she hadn't felt in years. She knew, with absolute certainty, there would be no returning to her former life. This new journey, perilous as it might be, was hers to claim. An hour later, Clara descended the grand staircase, a vision in silver silk and duchess lace. The gown shimmered with every movement, catching the light from the crystal chandeliers that adorned Blackwood House. Alistair waited at the bottom, his tall figure commanding in formal black evening attire. In the weeks since their clandestine meeting in the conservatory, something had shifted between them. A deepening of trust, perhaps, or something more profound that neither dared name. "Lady Clara," he said, taking her gloved hand as she reached the final step, his voice a low, warm rumble. "You outshine every star in the heavens tonight." "Flattery, your grace," she replied with a smile, a playful glint in her eyes. "How unlike you." "Not flattery," he corrected, his gaze unwavering, "merely accurate observation." Isabel appeared at her brother's side, lovely in pale blue that complemented her delicate coloring. "Clara, you look magnificent. The ball will be the talk of London for months." "Thanks to your tireless efforts," Clara said warmly, genuinely fond of the younger woman who had become a dear friend. "And yours," Isabel insisted. "Alexander says you have a gift for organization that rivals his own. High praise indeed from my perfectionist brother." The Duke's lips quirked in a half-smile. "I merely recognize efficiency when I encounter it." "Such a romantic soul," Isabel teased, nudging her brother affectionately. "Oh, Dr. Grant has arrived. I must speak with him about the hospital committee meeting tomorrow." As Isabel hurried off to greet the physician, Alistair offered Clara his arm. "Shall we greet our guests? The first carriages are arriving." For the next hour, they stood together in the entrance hall, welcoming London's elite to Blackwood House. Clara noted with interest the varying reactions to their joint hosting duties, surprise from most, speculation from some, and poorly concealed disapproval from a select few. Lady Seraphina Ashworth arrived on the arm of a distinguished gentleman who was not her husband, Lord Alaric Vane. "Sir Malcolm sends his regrets," Seraphina explained, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Urgent business in Manchester. Lord Vane was kind enough to escort me in his absence." "How fortunate," Alistair remarked, his tone neutral, though Clara sensed his underlying tension. "Lord Vane, I believe you know Lady Clara Atherton." The silver-haired Earl bowed over Clara's hand. "Only by reputation, I'm afraid." "A pleasure to make your acquaintance at last, Lady Clara." "The pleasure is mine, my lord," Clara replied automatically, though something in the Earl's appraising gaze made her uneasy. As the couple moved on, Alistair leaned close to murmur in her ear. "Keep your distance from Vane. He and Ashworth are close associates, and his presence here is no coincidence." The warning sent a shiver down Clara's spine, a stark reminder that beneath the glittering surface of the evening lay far darker currents. Lord Julian Croft arrived shortly thereafter, his handsome face lighting at the sight of Clara. Over the past weeks, he had called at Beatrice's townhouse several times, his attentions becoming increasingly marked despite Clara's polite rebuffs. "Lady Clara," he said, bowing deeply, "you are a vision tonight. I hope I may claim at least one dance." Before Clara could respond, Alistair intervened smoothly. "I fear Lady Clara's dance card is quite full, Lord Julian. As co-hostess, her duties are numerous this evening." Julian's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Perhaps later, then." As he moved away, Clara glanced at Alistair. "That was rather pointed, Your Grace." "Julian has been asking questions about you," Alistair replied quietly, his gaze sweeping the room. "Questions that go beyond mere social interest. About your finances, primarily the exact value of Rosewood Manor, your connections in Derbyshire." His gray eyes darkened. "He is not what he seems, Clara." The use of her given name, rare despite their growing closeness, emphasized the seriousness of his concern. "You still suspect him of involvement in the threat against me?" Clara asked, her voice low. Despite the young Viscount's continued attempts to engage her interest, she had found him charming, if somewhat shallow, hardly the type to resort to anonymous threats. "I suspect everyone until proven trustworthy," Alistair replied grimly, his gaze finally meeting hers. "A habit that has served me well over the years." He paused, as the arrival of the final guests prevented further discussion, his expression unwavering. "But yes, he ranks high among my concerns." Clara felt the weight of his words, a cold certainty settling in her chest. The glittering ball, the elegant smiles, the charming conversation, it was all a fragile facade, concealing a dangerous game of hidden motives and ruthless ambition. Soon the ballroom was filled with elegant couples circling to the strains of a waltz, the atmosphere one of unrestrained festivity. Clara found herself partnered first with Lord Edward Finch, whose kind manner and gentle humor provided a welcome respite from the underlying tension of the evening. "You have wrought a miracle, Lady Clara," he remarked as they navigated the crowded floor. "I have not seen Blackwood House so alive in years." "The credit belongs to Isabel and His Grace," Clara demurred. "I think not," Lord Edward replied with a knowing smile. "Alistair has changed since meeting you. There is a lightness to him that has been absent since Evelyn's death. Some might say, even before." The dance ended before Clara could formulate a suitable response, her cheeks warm under Lord Edward's perceptive gaze. Her next partner was Dr. Thomas Grant, whose serious demeanor concealed a dry wit she'd come to appreciate during their committee meetings for the hospital fundraiser. "You appear to have survived the preparations unscathed," he observed as they joined the set for a country dance. "Isabel thrives under your influence. I have not seen her so animated in years." "She is a remarkable young woman," Clara replied sincerely. "I only wish her health were more robust." Dr. Grant's expression grew thoughtful. "Indeed, though I believe her condition improves with positive stimulation. Your friendship has been a tonic, more effective than any medicine I could prescribe." "As has the Duke's increased attentiveness," Clara noted. "He dotes on her, though he tries to disguise it beneath that stern exterior." "Alistair Beaumont is a man of deep feelings, carefully controlled," Dr. Grant said. "Those who earn his regard are fortunate indeed." "And those who earn his enmity?" Clara asked, thinking of the mysterious threat in Julian's accusations. Dr. Grant's eyes met hers soberly. "Would be wise to proceed with caution. The Duke does not forgive easily, nor forget at all." The words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the glittering surface of the ball. Clara felt a prickle of unease, knowing she was now irrevocably bound to Alistair's world, a world where enemies were ruthless, and past grievances held a deadly sway. Clara had just accepted a glass of champagne from a footman when Lady Seraphina Ashworth appeared at her elbow. "Lady Clara," Seraphina purred, her crimson gown a striking contrast to Clara's silver. "How cleverly you have managed everything." One would almost believe you were born to Blackwood House rather than a recent acquisition." Clara maintained her composure despite the insult. "The Duke and Lady Isabel have been most welcoming. The success of tonight belongs to them." "How modest," Lady Seraphina remarked, sipping her champagne, a tinkling sound devoid of warmth. "Though I wonder if you fully appreciate the position in which you find yourself." "I'm afraid I don't take your meaning." Seraphina's perfect lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No? Let me be plain, then. Alistair Beaumont is not a man who forms attachments lightly. That he has singled you out is noteworthy. We share an interest in the Children's Hospital," Clara replied carefully. "Nothing more," Lady Seraphina laughed. "My dear, we are both women of the world. The Duke's interest extends far beyond charity work, as all of London can see. I merely wonder if you understand what accepting such interest might entail. Again, I must profess confusion, Lady Seraphina." Seraphina leaned closer, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "There are aspects of Alexander's character unknown to you, darker aspects that led to his first wife's unfortunate end." Clara felt a chill despite the warmth of the crowded room. "I believe such rumors are greatly exaggerated." "Are they?" Lady Seraphina arched a perfect eyebrow. "Perhaps you should ask why Evelyn was so afraid in those final months. Why she wrote those desperate letters begging for help. Why no one dared to intervene until it was too late." As Lady Seraphina subtly whispered her insinuations, Lady Isabel, standing nearby and out of direct sight, quietly observed Seraphina's actions. Isabel, though delicate, possessed a keen, watchful eye. She saw Seraphina discreetly touch her wrist to a small, ornamental vial concealed in her glove. Then, with a casual, almost imperceptible movement, Seraphina subtly brushed her fingers against the rim of her champagne glass, the very glass she held before Alistair's arrival. Isabel's breath hitched. A chilling realization dawned on her, a crucial seed of doubt about any future collapse Seraphina might experience. The gesture was so swift, so practiced, that only Isabel's focused observation, sharpened by years of quiet watchfulness, could have caught it. Before Clara could respond to Seraphina's veiled threats, Alistair appeared at her side, his expression cold as he regarded Lady Seraphina. "Seraphina," he said, his voice like ice, "I trust you are enjoying the evening immensely." "Immensely," she replied, unperturbed by his frosty tone. "Lady Clara and I were just becoming better acquainted." "How fortunate for her," he said with cutting precision. "Clara, Isabel requests your presence in the small drawing room. Something regarding the charity auction." Grateful for the interruption, Clara excused herself, though Lady Seraphina's parting smile lingered unpleasantly in her mind as Alistair guided her through the crowd. "What did Seraphina say to you?" Alistair asked once they were relatively private in a quiet alcove. "Nothing of consequence," Clara replied, reluctant to repeat the insinuations. Alistair's jaw tightened. "She mentioned Evelyn. It wasn't a question." "Yes," Clara admitted. "She suggested there was more to your wife's death than is commonly known." "And do you believe her?" His voice was carefully neutral, but Clara sensed the importance of her answer. "I believe," she said slowly, "that people rarely act without motive. Lady Seraphina clearly bears you ill will. The question is why?" Something like relief flickered in his eyes. "A perceptive observation. Seraphina once believed herself to be a suitable match for me. I disagreed." "Before your marriage to Evelyn?" "Yes." "Seraphina married Ashworth a month after my engagement to Evelyn was announced." His expression darkened. "She has never forgiven either slight." A sudden commotion near the ballroom entrance interrupted their conversation. Lord Julian Croft had arrived, clearly intoxicated, his handsome features flushed as he loudly demanded another glass of champagne from a startled footman. "Damnation," Alistair muttered, "just what the evening needed." He started toward the disturbance, but Clara caught his arm. "Let me. A scene would only draw more attention." Before he could object, Clara moved swiftly to Julian's side, taking his arm with a firm grip disguised as a friendly gesture. "Lord Julian, how pleasant to see you again. I believe you promised to show me the library earlier. Shall we?" Confusion crossed his face, followed by a slow smile of comprehension. Lady Clara, of course. The library. She guided him from the ballroom, aware of Alistair's watchful gaze as they departed. The library, blessedly empty, offered a quiet retreat from the festivities. Clara released Julian's arm once the door closed behind them. "You should sit, my lord. You seem unwell." Julian laughed bitterly. Unwell? Perhaps, though drunk would be more accurate. He stumbled to a leather armchair, collapsing into it with little grace. "Forgive me, Lady Clara. I am not at my best this evening." "So I observe," she replied coolly. "May I ask what prompts such behavior?" He studied her through bloodshot eyes. "You truly don't know, do you? How extraordinary!" "Know what?" "That you are in grave danger," he said. His voice suddenly cleared despite his apparent intoxication. "That Alistair Beaumont is not the man you believe him to be." Clara sighed. "Lord Julian, if you have summoned me here merely to repeat tired rumors—" "Not rumors," he interrupted fiercely. "Truth. Evelyn Beaumont did not take her own life. She was murdered." A chill ran down Clara's spine. "That is a serious accusation, sir." "One I can prove," Julian insisted. "I have seen the letters Evelyn wrote before her death, not just to her family, but to my father. They speak of fear, yes, but also of evidence she had discovered, evidence of the Duke's involvement in my uncle's death 5 years ago." Clara struggled to maintain her composure. "Your uncle? The previous Viscount Croft," he explained. "Officially, he died of heart failure. In reality, he was ruined by Alistair Beaumont's financial manipulations, driven to despair, and then, when he threatened exposure, silenced permanently." "This is absurd," Clara said, though doubt had begun to creep into her mind. "Why would the Duke target your uncle?" "For the same reason he targets anyone who stands in his way," Julian replied bitterly. "Power, control. The Croft estates bordered Blackwood to the east. My uncle refused to sell certain parcels Beaumont wanted for expansion, a mistake that cost him everything." Before she could respond, the library door opened. Alistair entered, his expression thunderous as he surveyed the scene. "Julian," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "I believe it's time you departed." The younger man rose, straightening his waistcoat with exaggerated care. "I was just leaving, Your Grace. Lady Clara and I have had a most illuminating conversation." "Indeed." Alistair's gaze flickered to Clara's face. "How fascinating!" Julian moved toward the door, pausing as he drew level with the Duke. "She deserves to know the truth, Beaumont, about everything." "Get out," Alistair replied evenly, "while you still can." Something like fear flashed in Julian's eyes, quickly masked by bravado. With a final bow to Clara, he departed, leaving a tense silence in their wake. Alistair closed the library door, leaning against it for a moment before turning to Clara. "I apologize for the interruption. Julian has always lacked discretion, particularly when in his cups." "He seemed remarkably coherent for a man supposedly in his cups," Clara observed. Alistair's expression sharpened. "What did he say to you?" Clara hesitated, torn between loyalty to Alistair and the disturbing seeds of doubt Julian had planted. "He made accusations about Evelyn's death, about your business dealings with his uncle." "I see." Alistair moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames for a long moment. "And do you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe," Clara admitted. "Every person in this house seems to have a different version of the truth. Lady Seraphina hints at dark secrets. Lord Julian alleges murder. And you," she faltered. "And I," he prompted. "You reveal only what you must." "When you must," she said softly. "Always holding something in reserve." He turned to face her, his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Would complete honesty serve either of us well, Clara? Would you truly wish to know every shadow in my past, every compromise I have made to protect what is mine?" She met his gaze steadily, I would rather know an uncomfortable truth than believe a comforting lie. Alistair moved toward her slowly, stopping when only a few feet separated them. Then here is truth, unvarnished. I did not kill Evelyn, nor did I drive her to take her own life, but I failed her nonetheless. I saw her suffering and believed it temporary, treatable. I was wrong. Clara's heart constricted at the pain evident in his voice. And Lord Julian's uncle? Frederick Croft ruined himself through gambling and poor investments, Alistair said flatly. I offered to purchase his lands at fair market value before his creditors seized them. He refused out of pride, then accused me of orchestrating his downfall when those same creditors foreclosed. He died of heart failure after a particularly violent argument with his nephew, the very man who now accuses me of murder. Clara studied his face, searching for signs of deception, but finding only weary honesty. Why would Lord Julian lie about such things? Clara asked. Because the truth implicates him, Alistair replied. Julian inherited estates heavily encumbered by his uncle's debts. Most of those debts were held by Sir Malcolm Ashworth's bank. Ashworth agreed to restructure the loans on favorable terms in exchange for Julian's assistance in certain matters. Matters concerning you. And now it seems concerning you as well. Alistair closed the remaining distance between them, taking her hands in his. Clara, I have not been entirely forthcoming about why I approached you that night at the Pembrokes' ball. Her heart quickened at his touch. I had assumed it was mere chance. Nothing in my life happens by chance, he said quietly. I sought you out because I had received information that Julian intended to court you, not for your charms, considerable though they are, but because of Rosewood Manor's strategic position. Strategic? Your estate sits between Blackwood and the railway line being constructed to Southampton, Alistair explained. Control of Rosewood would allow access to that railway, access that would increase the value of surrounding properties enormously. And you believe Lord Julian intended to gain that control through marriage to me? The idea was both insulting and alarmingly plausible. I believe Julian acts as Ashworth's agent in this. Yes, Alistair confirmed. When I appeared to develop an interest in you myself, their plans required adjustment. Hence the threatening note intended to frighten you away from me. The revelation left Clara momentarily speechless. Everything, their meeting, his attention, the danger that now surrounded her, all stemmed from a cold calculation of property and advantage. If this is all about property and railway access, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, why not simply tell me from the beginning? Why the elaborate charade of social calls and charity committees? Because, he said, his voice low and unexpectedly gentle, what began as strategic intervention became something I neither expected nor planned for. Clara withdrew her hands from his, needing space to think. And what was that? Genuine regard, he replied simply. Admiration. A connection I have not felt since, perhaps ever. Before Clara could respond to this startling admission, a sharp knock at the library door interrupted the moment. Alistair stepped back, his expression closing like a shutter as Isabel entered, her face pale with concern. Alexander, Clara, forgive the intrusion, but there's been an incident. Lady Seraphina has collapsed in the ballroom. What happened? Alistair demanded, immediately alert. Dr. Grant is attending her now, Isabel explained hurriedly. She complained of dizziness, then fainted. There's speculation that her champagne may have been tampered with. Clara felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Tampered? Isabel nodded grimly. Dr. Grant believes she may have been poisoned. Lord Alaric Vane claims he saw Clara speaking with Lady Seraphina shortly before the incident. Alistair's expression darkened. Vane claims what, exactly? Isabel wrung her hands. There are whispers, Alexander, suggestions that perhaps Clara had reason to silence Seraphina after their conversation, and that she might have enlisted Julian's help. That's preposterous, Clara exclaimed. Lady Seraphina was perfectly well when I left her. Of course it's absurd, Alistair agreed, his voice cold with anger. This is no coincidence. Ashworth's sudden return, Vane's accusations, Seraphina's mysterious illness. It's all calculated to create scandal, to link your name to something unsavory." He turned to Clara, his gray eyes burning with a fierce protectiveness. "And it's all connected to us, Clara, to whatever is developing between us. Someone is determined to prevent it by discrediting you, frightening you away, or worse." Isabel looked between them, comprehension dawning on her face. "Alexander, you don't think—" "I think," he interrupted, "that we need to speak with Ashworth and Vane immediately. Isabel, please return to the ballroom. Assure our guests that Lady Seraphina is receiving the best care, and that the evening will continue as planned." Alistair turned back to Clara, his expression grave. "You should return to the ballroom as well. The last thing we need is for you to appear to be hiding." Clara lifted her chin. "I prefer to accompany you. If I am being accused, even obliquely, I have the right to confront my accusers." A flash of admiration crossed his face, quickly masked. "Very well," he conceded. "But stay close to me, and say nothing unless directly addressed. Ashworth is dangerous when cornered." Her heart pounding, Clara nodded. Together, they made their way through the mansion's corridors. They arrived at the blue drawing room. Inside, they found Sir Malcolm Ashworth pacing before the fireplace, his florid face mottled with what might have been rage or concern, perhaps both. Lord Alaric Vane stood by the window, while Dr. Thomas Grant examined a pale, semi-conscious Lady Seraphina on a chaise longue. "Beaumont!" Sir Malcolm snarled as they entered, his gaze immediately fixing on Alistair. "What the devil is happening in your house? My wife has been poisoned." "We don't know that for certain," Dr. Grant interjected, looking up from his patient. "Lady Seraphina's symptoms could indicate several conditions." "She was perfectly well until she drank that champagne," Lord Alaric Vane insisted. "Champagne served at your instruction, Beaumont." Alistair's expression remained impassive. "Champagne served to over 300 guests, none of whom have reported illness. A curious poison that affects only one person, wouldn't you say?" Sir Malcolm's gaze shifted to Clara, his eyes narrowing. Perhaps not the champagne itself, but what was added to it. "I understand Lady Clara was seen speaking with my wife shortly before she collapsed," Lord Alaric Vane stated, his tone silky. Clara stepped forward, ignoring Alistair's warning glance. "As were dozens of other guests, Sir Malcolm. Lady Seraphina and I exchanged brief pleasantries, nothing more." "And then you hurried off to a private meeting with Julian," Lord Alaric added. "Most curious timing." "Lord Julian Croft was causing a disturbance," Clara replied evenly. "I merely removed him from the ballroom to prevent embarrassment. The Duke joined us moments later." "A convenient explanation," Sir Malcolm muttered, his eyes full of suspicion. Clara felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but she met his gaze without flinching. Her composure, hard-won, was her shield. Sir Malcolm Ashworth's gaze, sharp and calculating, lingered on Clara, though his words were directed at Alistair. "A convenient explanation, Your Grace." Lady Clara's hurried meeting with Croft, just moments before Seraphina's indisposition. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks at the implied impropriety, but before she could respond, Alistair moved. He stepped to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring, a bulwark against the accusations. His voice, when he spoke, was cold, cutting through the tense air. "Sir Malcolm, your insinuations border on slander. Lady Clara is above reproach, as anyone who knows her can attest." Sir Malcolm merely sneered, an ugly twist of his mouth. "And how well do you know her, Beaumont? You met barely a month ago, yet suddenly she co-hosts your events, visits your home unchaperoned, and appears to have remarkable influence over you. One might wonder what hold she has established so quickly." Before Alistair could deliver a retort, Dr. Thomas Grant rose from Lady Seraphina's side. His face was grave, but his voice was firm. "This accomplishes nothing. Lady Seraphina needs rest and quiet. Whatever the cause of her indisposition, this interrogation serves only to delay proper treatment." Sir Malcolm, however, was not to be deterred. "And what is your diagnosis, Doctor?" he demanded. Dr. Grant hesitated, glancing briefly at Alistair. "I cannot be certain without further examination, but her symptoms suggest possible belladonna poisoning. dilated pupils, dry mouth, elevated pulse. Fortunately, the dose appears to have been small. With proper care, she should recover fully. Lord Alaric Vane, who had been observing with an unnerving stillness, now spoke, his voice smooth and meaningful. "Belladonna," he repeated, drawing out the syllables. "A plant commonly found in English gardens, including perhaps the conservatory of this very house." Alistair's jaw tightened, the muscle twitching under his skin. His gaze, colder than any winter storm, fixed on Vane. "If you have an accusation to make, Vane, make it plainly." The Earl merely offered a show of false innocence. "I merely observe that the means were readily available, Your Grace, and that certain parties might benefit from Lady Seraphina's incapacitation." "Enough," Dr. Grant interrupted, his voice brooking no argument. "Lady Seraphina requires quiet. I suggest she be moved to a bedchamber where she can rest undisturbed." Alistair nodded, his features impassive once more. "Of course. Isabel's room is nearest. Sir Malcolm, you are welcome to remain with your wife." Sir Malcolm, for all his bluster, declared, "I'm not leaving Seraphina." "Nor would I expect you to," Alistair replied coldly. "Dr. Grant, please see to Lady Seraphina's comfort. Vane, I believe your duties as escort are concluded for the evening." The Earl bristled at the dismissal, but could find no reasonable grounds for objection. With a stiff bow to Clara and a meaningful glance at Sir Malcolm, he departed. Once Seraphina had been moved to Isabel's chamber, with Sir Malcolm and Dr. Grant in attendance, Alistair led Clara quickly to a small ante-room adjacent to the ballroom. The air here was less stifling, but the tension was palpable. "This is no coincidence," he said, his voice low and urgent, his gaze sweeping the room as though expecting new threats to materialize from the shadows. Sir Malcolm's sudden return, Seraphina's mysterious illness. It's all calculated to create scandal, to link your name to something unsavory. Clara stared at him, bewildered by the lengths to which their enemies would go. But why? What could anyone hope to gain by harming me, or by making such a spectacle? "Several possibilities present themselves," Alistair replied, his expression troubled. "The most obvious being to pressure me into selling certain properties or business interests I have acquired in recent years, particularly those that border Rosewood Manor." Clara's mind raced, connecting it to her own discoveries. "But surely there are simpler ways to prevent a railway connection across my land." Alistair's dark gray eyes met hers, holding a deeper concern. "Sir Malcolm has harbored resentment against me for years, dating back to a business venture in which he felt cheated, a generational wound his family blames on mine. Seraphina's grievance is more personal, as I explained. If they believe I have developed genuine feelings for you, Clara, they would seek to destroy what they cannot have." Clara felt a chill despite the warmth of the room, the realization chilling her to the bone. "Not just my reputation, then, but any chance of happiness between us." "Yes," Alistair agreed, his voice grim. "The question is how far they are willing to go. Poisoning Seraphina herself to cast suspicion on you suggests a disturbing commitment to their cause." Clara considered this, a new horror dawning. "But surely Lady Seraphina wouldn't willingly ingest poison, even at her husband's instruction?" Alistair met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Perhaps she didn't know. Isabel observed Seraphina discreetly touching her wrist to a small vial, then brushing her fingers against the rim of her champagne glass. A small amount of belladonna in a toilet, absorbed through the skin rather than ingested, would produce similar symptoms without her knowledge or consent. The cold calculation required for such a scheme was horrifying to contemplate. "These are not merely business rivals, Alistair. These are dangerous enemies." "Yes," he agreed grimly, his expression hardening. "Which is why you must leave London tonight, not tomorrow." Clara stared at him in shock. "Leave now?" "Return to Rosewood Manor at first light," he insisted, his voice brooking no argument. "Sir Malcolm and his allies cannot touch you there, on your own land, surrounded by loyal servants." The stark warning sent a chill through her, but her spirit rebelled. "And what of you? Am I to flee while you remain to face these accusations alone?" "I have weathered worse storms," Alistair replied, his gaze unwavering, though a flicker of something raw, Something akin to vulnerability crossed his features. "Once the immediate scandal subsides, I will join you at Rosewood. There are matters between us that remain unresolved, Clara. Matters that deserve to be addressed away from prying eyes and malicious tongues." The intensity of his gaze left no doubt as to his meaning, sending a quickening flutter through Clara's heart. Yet practical concerns intruded on the moment. "My reputation may already be compromised," she pointed out. "Leaving suddenly will only appear to confirm my guilt." "Your cousin, Beatrice, will accompany you," Alistair countered, already formulating a plan. "They can claim a sudden family matter in Hampshire. Isabel will ensure the proper story circulates in London." Clara could see the logic in his plan, yet something in her rebelled at the thought of retreat. "I dislike running from false accusations." "It is not retreat," he said firmly, taking her hands in his grip almost painful in its intensity. "It is strategic repositioning. At Rosewood, you hold the advantage. Sir Malcolm and his allies will be forced to approach on your terms, if they dare approach at all." Clara's reluctance softened, swayed by his unwavering determination and the logic of his argument. Before Clara could respond, the ante-room door opened, and Isabel appeared, her pale face drawn with fresh concern. "Alexander, Clara, you must come quickly." Her voice was a trembling whisper. "It's Lord Julian. He's been found unconscious in the garden." Alistair's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "And there's a note," Isabel added, her voice barely audible. "A note that mentions Clara." Alistair's gaze, now sharp as a predator's, swung to his sister. "What does it say?" Isabel wrung her hands, her voice trembling as she recited the ominous words. "The widow danced with death. Now death claims another." It was pinned to his coat, she explained. "Alexander, what does it mean?" Alistair's eyes, dark with a grim understanding, met Clara's. "It means," he replied flatly, "that our enemies have grown bolder than I anticipated. Clara, stay with Isabel. I must see Croft myself." "I'm coming with you," Clara insisted, her voice steady despite the chill that permeated her. "If my name is being used in this foul business, I have a right to know the truth of it." After a moment's hesitation, Alistair nodded. "Very well. Isabel, return to our guests. Say only that Lord Julian has taken ill and is being attended to, nothing more." The garden, illuminated by strategically placed lanterns for the evening's festivities, held an eerie quality as Clara and Alistair made their way along the gravel paths. Several footmen stood in a tight circle near the conservatory entrance, their faces grave in the flickering light. "Stand aside," Alistair commanded, and the men parted to reveal Lord Julian Croft, sprawled on the ground, his evening clothes disheveled, a thin trickle of blood running from his temple. Dr. Grant knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "How is he?" Alistair asked tersely. Dr. Grant looked up, his expression troubled, alive, but deeply unconscious. "He's been struck on the head, deliberately, I'd say, given the nature of the wound." Alistair indicated a folded paper clutched in one of the footman's hands. "And this?" "Found pinned to his lordship's coat, Your Grace," the servant explained, handing over the note. Alistair read it, his jaw tightening, then passed it to Clara. The message, composed of cut newspaper letters like the previous threat, was exactly as Isabel had reported. "Who found him?" Clara asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I did, Your Grace," replied one of the younger footmen. "I was checking the garden lanterns when I saw someone lying near the path. Thought he might be a guest who'd had too much champagne, but when I approached—" "Did you see anyone else in the garden?" Alistair pressed, his voice sharp. The footman shook his head. "No, Your Grace, though I heard the garden gate close just as I was coming around the hedge. Thought nothing of it at the time." Alistair turned to Dr. Grant. "Can he be moved?" "Carefully," the physician replied. "He should be taken inside, but not disturbed by the general company. A quiet room where I can examine him properly." "The study," Alistair decided, his gaze sweeping the footman. "You men, carry him gently. Dr. Grant, see to his injuries. I need to know the moment he regains consciousness." As the footman carefully lifted Julian's limp form, Alistair drew Clara aside. "This changes everything. Julian was not meant to be a victim. He's been working with Sir Malcolm all along." Clara considered this, her mind reeling. Perhaps he outlived his usefulness, or threatened to expose their plans. Alistair's expression remained grim. Possibly. Either way, this attack, so close to Seraphina's poisoning, is clearly meant to implicate us further. The note makes that explicit. Us? Clara repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. Not me alone. Death claims another, Alistair quoted grimly, his voice low. The implication being that you were responsible for Seraphina, and now Julian has fallen victim to the same hand, or to mine acting in your defense. The calculated malice behind such a scheme made Clara feel physically ill, a cold dread settling in her stomach. These are not the actions of mere business rivals, Alistair. This is something more personal, more vindictive. Yes, he agreed, his expression darkening, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Which makes my earlier advice even more urgent. You must leave London tonight, not tomorrow. I'll make arrangements immediately. Alistair's grip on her hands tightened, his eyes fierce. Clara, listen to me. Sir Malcolm is capable of far worse than false accusations and staged accidents. If he truly believes you stand between him and his goals, whether those goals involve me, your land, or something else entirely, he will not hesitate to eliminate that obstacle permanently. The stark warning sent a fresh chill through her. And what of you? Are you not equally at risk? Sir Malcolm and I have been engaged in this dance for years, he replied, his voice a low rumble. We understand each other's limits. You, however, are a new factor, one he has not yet measured fully. That makes you unpredictable to him, and therefore dangerous. Clara recognized the logic in his argument, but her heart rebelled at the thought of abandoning him amidst the growing scandal. If I leave now, it will appear as an admission of guilt. If you stay, he countered, his voice firm, you may not have the opportunity to prove your innocence. Clara, please, for once, set aside your courage and consider your safety. The rare plea, delivered with such evident concern, weakened her resolve. Very well, she conceded reluctantly. But I will not go to Rosewood Manor. It's too remote, and word of these events will reach Derbyshire eventually. Her mind, ever practical, sought an alternative. I have a small property in Derbyshire, inherited from my mother. Few know of its existence. I will go there instead. Relief softened Alistair's features. A wise choice. I'll arrange for a private coach to take you and your maid. Beatrice must remain here to counter any suggestion that your departure was precipitous or suspicious. Clara nodded. She will not like that. She will comply when she understands the stakes, he replied confidently. Now we must return to the ballroom separately to avoid further gossip. Continue as though nothing is amiss while I make the necessary arrangements. As they approached the house, Alistair paused, turning to Clara with an expression of such intensity that it took her breath away. When this is resolved, and it will be resolved, there are matters between us that require addressing, matters of considerable importance to me. The implication was clear, and despite the dangers surrounding them, Clara felt a flutter of anticipation. To me as well, she admitted softly. His eyes held hers for a long moment, conveying feelings too complex for words. Then, with visible effort, he schooled his features back to the impassive mask of the Duke of Blackwood. Until Derbyshire, then, he said formally, though his eyes still burned with unspoken promise. Until Derbyshire, she echoed, wondering if they were sealing a pact or a fate. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and mechanical conversation for Lady Clara Atherton. She moved through the glittering crowd like a sleepwalker, her mind occupied with preparations for her imminent departure and a gnawing concern for the unconscious Lord Julian Croft. Every polite inquiry, every strained laugh, felt distant, muffled by the rising tide of anxiety and the knowledge of the dangers still lurking beneath Blackwood House's elegant surface. She longed for the quiet solitude of her guest chamber, for the moment she could truly process the turbulent events of the night. By midnight, most guests had departed, unaware of the drama unfolding beneath the evening's elegant surface. Only the hospital committee members remained, gathered in the smaller drawing room for a final tally of the funds raised. Lady Isabel Beaumont, her pale face flushed with exhaustion, but her eyes bright with triumph, announced, Over £1,500. A remarkable success by any measure. As the meeting concluded, Isabel approached Clara with a forced smile, her voice low. Alistair asks if you would join him in the library. There are some final matters regarding the fundraiser that require your attention. Clara understood the pretext immediately, her heart quickening. Of course, she replied, striving for composure. Please extend my congratulations to the committee for tonight's success. The library, dimly lit by a single lamp and the dying embers in the grate, held a somber atmosphere. As Clara entered, Alistair stood by the window, his tall figure silhouetted against the night sky. He turned at her approach, his face grave in the shadowed light. Everything is arranged, he said without preamble, his voice low and firm. A private carriage will collect you from Lady Beatrice's townhouse at 4 this morning. Your maid has been instructed to pack only essentials. The fewer who know of your departure, the better. Clara nodded, a sudden weight of finality settling over her. And Beatrice? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I've spoken with her, Alistair confirmed, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. She understands the necessity, though she's not pleased. Your cousin is a formidable woman when provoked. Clara managed a small smile in return. She is protective, she agreed. As it seems, are you? His eyes met hers, and the faint amusement vanished, replaced by an intensity that made her breath catch. Alistair moved closer, the lamplight casting his features in sharp relief. The strong jaw, the penetrating eyes, the mouth that could be both stern and unexpectedly gentle. I protect what matters to me, Clara, what I value, what I... He trailed off, the unspoken word hanging in the air between them, too significant to be voiced in haste or under duress. Clara's heart quickened, understanding the unspoken sentiment that transcended all the danger and intrigue. This was more than strategy. It was something profound and deeply personal. This separation need not be long, he continued after a moment, his voice regaining its customary measured tone. A week, perhaps 2, until the immediate scandal subsides and I can identify who orchestrated tonight's events. Then I will come to you in Derbyshire. He reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. Before you go, I have something for you. Clara accepted the pouch, surprised by its weight. Inside, she found an exquisite gold locket on a delicate chain. The locket's face was engraved with intertwined roses, their stems forming an elegant knot. It's beautiful, she murmured, touched by the unexpected gift. Open it, he urged softly. The locket contained a small, folded paper, rather than the customary portrait or lock of hair. Clara carefully extracted it, unfolding a tiny note written in Alistair's bold hand. Where shadows end, light begins. Trust in that light, as I have learned to trust in you. The simple message brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Wear it, he said, taking the locket from her trembling fingers and moving behind her to fasten it around her neck. Not merely as remembrance, but as promise. The weight of the locket settled against her skin, warm and somehow reassuring. When Alistair's hands lingered at her nape, Clara turned to face him, suddenly unwilling to leave with so much still unspoken between them. Alistair, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. When this is over, when we meet again in Derbyshire, what then? His eyes held hers, all pretense and reserve stripped away. Then, Clara Atherton, I intend to ask you a question I never thought to ask any woman again, a question that frightens me far more than any business rival or social scandal. Her heart quickened at the implication, a thrilling, terrifying hope blossoming within her chest. And if my answer is yes, Clara whispered, then, he said simply, his voice rough with emotion, the shadows that have defined my existence these past years will finally give way to light. The raw honesty in his voice, the vulnerability beneath the strength, undid her final reservations. Clara reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw with wondering tenderness. I find, she whispered, that I am suddenly impatient for Derbyshire. Something fierce and joyful flared in his eyes. With deliberate slowness, he bent his head until his lips hovered a breath away from hers. As am I. The kiss, when it came, was gentle yet profound, a sealing of promises unspoken, a bridge across the separation to come. Clara surrendered to it completely, her hands finding their way to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer with careful reverence. When they finally parted, Alistair pressed his forehead to hers, his breathing unsteady. "Now go," he said roughly, his voice thick with unspent emotion, "before I forget all propriety and reason." Clara stepped back reluctantly, her fingers touching the locket at her throat. "Until Derbyshire," she said, the words no longer a mere farewell but a vow. "Until Derbyshire," he echoed, the simple phrase carrying the weight of future and hope. With those words lingering in the air, Clara slipped out through a side door of the library, making her way back through the quiet mansion. The gold locket had become a talisman for Clara during the long weeks of separation. As autumn painted the Derbyshire hills in russet and gold, she would find herself absently touching the pendant, drawing comfort from the weight of Alistair's promise against her skin. Where shadows end, light begins. Words that had sustained her through days of uncertainty and nights of longing. 3 months had passed since her hasty departure from London in the pre-dawn hours following the charity ball. 3 months of correspondence carried by trusted messengers, of carefully worded letters that spoke of progress and patience. Alistair's investigations had taken longer than anticipated, the web of intrigue surrounding Sir Malcolm Ashworth's schemes proving more complex than either had imagined. But his last letter, received 2 days prior, had contained news worth the wait. Clara reread it now, her heart filled with a profound sense of relief. "My dearest Clara," the bold script declared, "justice long delayed has finally been served. Ashworth faces ruin and disgrace, his schemes exposed through his own carelessness and the testimony of unexpected allies. The evidence Ashworth had concealed, letters proving his deliberate sabotage of business rivals, including your late husband's shipping ventures, has been presented to the appropriate authorities. He will face charges of fraud and criminal conspiracy, charges from which even his considerable connections cannot shield him." The letter continued, revealing a surprising twist. Croft, upon regaining consciousness, proved surprisingly honorable when confronted with the full extent of Ashworth's manipulations. It seems he was as much pawn as conspirator, drawn into Ashworth's orbit through financial necessity rather than genuine malice. His testimony proved crucial. Clara smiled faintly. Lord Julian, the charming but shallow lord, had found a measure of redemption after all. His final act had been one of unexpected integrity, helping to unravel the very plot he had unwittingly served. With these matters resolved, Alistair's letter concluded, "I find there remains but one piece of unfinished business demanding my attention. I ride for Derbyshire on Wednesday, weather permitting, and hope to reach Rosewood by week's end." Today was Saturday. If Alistair's journey had proceeded as planned, he might arrive at any moment, a prospect that filled Clara with equal parts joy and trepidation. For while their letters had maintained the connection forged during those turbulent weeks in London, 3 months was ample time for hearts to cool, for priorities to shift, for promises to lose their urgency. Clara stood at the window of the small drawing room in Rosewood Cottage, her mother's childhood home that had proven the perfect sanctuary, remote enough for safety, yet close enough to civilization for necessary comforts. Behind her, a cheerful fire crackled in the grate, warding off the October chill. A book lay abandoned on the nearby table, her morning tea grown cold beside it, for Clara found herself increasingly distracted, her attention drawn inevitably to the road that wound through the valley below, the road from London. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A rider appeared on the road below, moving at a steady pace toward the cottage. Even at this distance, Clara recognized the straight-backed posture, the confident handling of the magnificent black stallion. Her heart leaped to her throat as she pressed a hand to the window, as though reaching across the remaining distance between them. It was him. It had to be. "Wilson," she called, her voice uncharacteristically breathless. "A visitor approaches. Please prepare refreshments in the drawing room." Her lady's maid appeared in the doorway, a knowing smile on her weathered face. "Already done, Your Grace," Wilson replied gently. "And I've had fresh water brought up for you to refresh yourself should you wish it." Clara smoothed her hands over her sage-green morning dress, Simple by London standards, but well suited to country life. Thank you, Wilson. That will be all for now. Alone once more, Clara touched the gold locket that had not left her throat since that night in the Blackwood library. Inside, Alistair's note had been joined by a pressed wildflower from the Derbyshire hills, a tangible reminder of the light he had promised would follow shadow. She took a deep, steadying breath. This was it. The culmination of everything. The moment she had dared to hope for, dared to believe in, even when shadows threatened to overwhelm. The cottage's small entrance hall echoed with the sound of the door-knocker. Clara moved to the drawing-room doorway, listening as Wilson admitted their visitor. Then footsteps in the hall, confident, measured, familiar. Alistair Beaumont stood framed in the doorway, his tall figure silhouetted against the light from the entrance hall. He was dressed for riding in a dark coat and buckskins, his cravat loosened from the journey. But it was his face that captured Clara's attention. The strong features relaxed in a way she had rarely seen in London, the gray eyes warm with an emotion that made her breath catch. "Lady Clara," he said, his deep voice washing over her like a physical caress. "Your Grace," she replied, fighting to maintain composure when her heart threatened to burst from her chest. For a moment, they regarded each other in silence, measuring the changes wrought by separation. Then Alistair stepped into the room, closing the distance between them with deliberate strides. "I find," he said quietly, his gaze unwavering, "that 3 months is an intolerably long time." "Interminable," Clara agreed, a smile tugging at her lips despite her effort at dignity. Another step brought him close enough that she could detect the scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to his clothing, could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, lines that deepened as he returned her smile. "You look well," he observed. "Derbyshire agrees with you. I have found peace here," she admitted, though not perhaps complete contentment. His eyebrow arched in silent question. "Contentment requires something more," Clara explained, bold in a way she would never have been before London. Before him, something I have been awaiting with considerable impatience. Understanding flared in his eyes, followed by a heat that quickened her pulse. Alistair reached for her hand, his touch sending a current of awareness through her. "May we sit? What I have to say deserves proper attention." Clara allowed him to lead her to the small settee before the fire. Once seated, however, he seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, his customary confidence giving way to a vulnerability she had glimpsed only rarely. "I practiced this speech 100 times on the journey from London," he confessed with a rueful smile. "Yet now I find all my careful phrases inadequate. Perhaps simplicity would serve better than eloquence," Clara suggested gently. Alistair's eyes met hers, direct and unflinching. "Very well, simplicity." Then he took a breath, his hand tightening around hers. "I love you, Clara Atherton. I believe I began to love you the moment you entered the Pembrokes ballroom, though I was too stubborn or too blind to recognize it immediately." The declaration, delivered with such straightforward honesty, stole Clara's breath. Though she had hoped, had perhaps even expected such feelings, hearing them voiced with such clarity was overwhelming. A warmth spread through her, chasing away the last vestiges of doubt and fear. "Our beginning was complicated by ulterior motives and external threats," Alistair continued, his gaze tender. "But what grew between us transcended those complications. In London, surrounded by danger and uncertainty, I discovered something I had thought lost to me forever, the capacity for trust, for hope, for love." Clara's eyes, now glistening with unshed tears, reflected his earnest expression. She understood. Their love hadn't been a gentle bloom in a sheltered garden. It had been forged in the crucible of danger and deceit, and emerged stronger for it. He released her hand only to reach into his waistcoat pocket, withdrawing a small box of burgundy velvet. "I come to you now without pretense or strategic purpose. I come simply as a man who has found his equal, his partner, his light after long darkness." Opening the box, he revealed a ring of exquisite craftsmanship, a central sapphire flanked by diamonds set in intricate gold filigree. "Clara Atherton," Alistair said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "would you do me the honor of becoming my wife Not for land or title or advantage, but for the simple, profound reason that I cannot imagine my future without you in it." Clara looked from the dazzling ring to the man offering it, this complex, commanding man who had entered her life like a storm, yet now gazed at her with such vulnerable hope. In that moment, all doubts, all lingering questions, dissolved like morning mist before the sun. "Yes," she said simply, her voice strong and clear despite the tears that threatened. "Yes, Alistair, I will marry you." Joy transformed his features, erasing years of care and shadow as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he was drawing her into his arms, his kiss a seal upon their promise, tender at first, then deepening with the passion they had held in check for so long. Clara clung to him, feeling a completeness she had never thought possible. When they finally parted, Alistair kept her close, his forehead pressed to hers in a gesture that had become uniquely theirs. "I had thought to suggest a lengthy engagement," he murmured, his voice husky. "Time for society to adjust to the idea of the notorious Duke of Blackwood taking a new duchess." Clara smiled against his lips. "And what do you suggest now?" "Now?" His gray eyes gleamed with a happiness she had never seen in them before. "Now I find myself unwilling to wait a day longer than necessary. Christmas at Blackwood. Perhaps a small ceremony with only those we truly trust in attendance." "Christmas," Clara agreed, her heart full to overflowing. "A fitting time for new beginnings." The wedding of Alistair Beaumont, Duke of Blackwood, to Lady Clara Atherton took place on Christmas Eve at the chapel on the Blackwood estate. Snow had fallen the night before, transforming the grounds into a glistening wonderland that seemed to reflect the joy of the occasion. Only a small gathering of trusted friends witnessed the ceremony. Lord and Lady Finch, Dr. Thomas Grant, Lady Beatrice Cavendish and her husband, Lord Julian Croft, and a radiant Lady Isabel Beaumont, whose health had improved markedly during her stay in Kent. To everyone's surprise, Lord Julian was also in attendance, his reconciliation with the Duke, one of the more unexpected outcomes of the Ashworth affair. Clara wore a gown of ivory silk embroidered with silver thread, her dark hair adorned with a coronet of white roses and holly berries. Alistair, resplendent in formal attire, watched her approach the altar with undisguised wonder, as though still amazed by the turn his life had taken. The service was simple, but deeply moving, the ancient vows exchanged with clear voices and unwavering commitment. When Alistair placed the wedding band beside the sapphire engagement ring on Clara's finger, his hands were steady, his eyes alight with a happiness few had ever witnessed in the once forbidding Duke of Blackwood. As they emerged from the chapel into the winter sunshine, their guests showering them with rose petals and good wishes, Clara looked up at her husband with a heart too full for words. Alistair returned her gaze with equal emotion, his hand warm and secure around hers. "Happy, Your Grace," he murmured, using her new title with evident pleasure. "Completely," Clara replied, squeezing his hand. "Though I believe true happiness is not a destination reached, but a journey shared." Alistair's smile deepened, his gray eyes bright with promise. "Then let us begin that journey together, my love, step by step, day by day, from this moment forward." And as they walked through the snow toward Blackwood House, where a Christmas feast awaited the wedding party, Clara knew with absolute certainty that the trembling widow who had entered that grand ball months ago had found not just a new life, but a love worth every risk, every challenge, every moment of doubt and danger that had led to this perfect day. For sometimes the most unexpected waltz leads to the most extraordinary journey, and the most feared duke proves to be the most beloved husband of all.